The Declaration of Independence is one of the most influential documents of all time.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Does that have a counterpart in the Czech Declaration?
Very much so, and it even includes that all women are equal.
I think it spurred on revolutions in other countries.
There is no doubt Thomas Jefferson influenced the French Declaration.
I'm Doug Ginsburg, a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals. Join me on a journey to discover the enduring legacy of our founding document. The words of our Declaration have had a universal appeal. They've traveled through time and space and emerged in some unexpected places.
Before Katrina, I had 3 big boats. Right now, I have only one small boat for me and my wife. Something to do and get some money to spend.
Robert Wynn and his wife Lynn have shrimped in the Gulf of Mexico for more than 40 years.
American fishermen, I get along with them very well.
The Wynns were among thousands of refugees who fled Vietnam when the North Vietnamese communists won the war. They escaped Saigon on her father's fishing boat. Robert's family stayed behind. Decades before, communist revolutionary Ho Chi Minh stood in a public square in Hanoi and read his preamble to Vietnam's Declaration of Independence.
Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
That's right. The Vietnamese Declaration of Independence starts by quoting our declaration.
Yet Ho rejected democracy. America backed the South against the North in the tragic Vietnam War. The war claimed more than 58,000 American lives and an estimated 2 million Vietnamese. Freedom was another casualty.
Freedom, but over there, no. My family all died in Vietnam with the war. Thank you, America. They had a big heart to help the refugee in 1975.
Self-government is an extraordinary human invention. Those documents that have birthed that invention get a special place in the human treasury. The Declaration of Independence is for sure one of those.
Danielle Allen is a Harvard University professor and author of the book Our Declaration.
The Declaration is our inheritance. It is something that earlier generations created to name their goal, their purpose. Their purpose was self-government, institutions resting on the consent of the governed that could deliver the safety and happiness of all the people.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
That they are endowed by their Creator
with certain unalienable rights.
That among these are life,
liberty,
and the pursuit of happiness.
That to secure these rights,
governments are instituted among men,
deriving their just powers
from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government
becomes destructive of these ends,
it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it.
And to institute new governments.
Laying its foundation on such principles
and organizing its powers in such form
as to them shall seem most likely
to affect their safety and happiness.
The whole of political philosophy is in that sentence. The most compact definition of democracy is in that sentence. The clearest account of the rights and responsibilities of citizens is in that sentence. That's all we need.
Since 1776, more than 100 countries have issued a Declaration of Independence with words or ideas inspired by or derived from our own, starting here in France. The American Revolution inspires hundreds of foreigners to come join the fight, including the 19-year-old French nobleman Gilbert de Motier, the Marquis de Lafayette. He joins General Washington's staff, and the two hit it off at once. Once America has won its independence, Lafayette returns to France, now a nation on the brink of revolution. This is the Palace of Versailles, and it was the home of King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. And clearly they lived like kings.
But the common people, 98% of France, were powerless and voiceless, but not hopeless.
On July 14, 1789, a mob storms the Bastille prison, a hated symbol of royal power.
A riot sets off a revolution, and Bastille Day would become France's national holiday. The French Revolution began with the promise of liberty, equality, and fraternity, or brotherhood. That's not how it ended. The king would lose his head to the guillotine, and 9 months later, so would the queen.
Every day, hundreds of Parisians were executed with la guillotine. You know, yeah, it was a terrible time.
The guillotine claimed more than 16,000 lives, mostly priests and nobles.
Our revolution succeeded. The French Revolution failed. This room, this palace, really says it all. France had a small nobility, a very large peasant class, and hardly anything in between.
We had to move from 40 kings history to a republic.
So France had the challenge of how to undo something as much as how to build something.
I've been invited to see a treasure at the Museum of the National Archives of France.
Thomas Jefferson was in Paris in 1789. So was Lafayette. And they worked together on different drafts of the French Declaration. And what is interesting is that Lafayette uses the word inalienable. It probably comes from the 1776 Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Declaration.
Inalienable rights, yes.
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 The wording may be slightly different, but the basic principles are the same. We, the French and the Americans, built democracy together.
The American Declaration of Independence and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man that followed it became models for the independence movements that would sweep the world in the 1800s and 1900s.
Recognize this American revolutionary? Simón Bolívar, the South American revolutionary, the George Washington of Latin America, and the most important figure in its history.
As a young man, Simón Bolívar traveled to the United States. He admired the American Revolution. Early in the 19th century, independence was slowly catching on, but nowhere like Latin America. Bolívar drove the Spanish from what are now Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, Venezuela, and the country named for him, Bolivia. It was the first of 4 great waves of independence that invoked the spirit of the American Revolution.
In the 20th century, 3 waves of independence would follow the one that had swept Latin America in the 19th century. Each of the 3 would shape the history of the Czech people.
At the end of the First World War, 4 empires lay in ruin: the Austro-Hungarian, German, Ottoman, and Russian. In a second wave of independence, new nations rose from the ruins, including Czechoslovakia. After World War I, Tomáš Masaryk, philosopher, statesman, and a founder of Czechoslovakia, traveled to Washington, D.C., where he drafted the Czech Declaration of Independence. Adela Gierchova is a professor at the Institute of Contemporary History.
So while declaring independence in the so-called Washington Declaration on the 18th of October, they also said, we accept the American principles as laid down by President Wilson, the principles of liberated mankind, of the actual equality of nations, and of governments deriving all their just power from the consent of the governed.
The phrase, deriving all their just power from the consent of the governed, echoes our U.S. Declaration of Independence. But the Czech Declaration went even further.
The document provided full equality for women before American women even had the right to vote. Sad to say, Czechoslovakia's independence lasted barely a generation.
On March the 12th, 1938, without warning, the German armies marched over the Austrian border.
6 months later, Hitler swallowed Czechoslovakia.
Marched in and took the whole of the Czech state.
6 months after that, Hitler plunged Europe into the Second World War.
The end of the Second World War triggered the third wave of independence as people around the world threw off colonial rule.
In the years following the war, more than 100 nations would emerge from Europe's empires. More than 50 nations emerged from the British Empire alone, including India, the jewel in the crown. From the French, more than 20 nations, and still more from the Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese empires.
In Europe, the tide ran the other way. The Soviet dictator, Joseph Stalin, imprisoned Eastern Europe behind an iron curtain.
This is the entrance to a nuclear bunker, which was built in the 50s.
Ladislav Winter is an expert on the Soviet era in Prague.
It was designed to take care of up to 5,000 civilians.
The United States was not about to bomb anybody, so why all of this?
Well, that's what you were told. Basically, every single day we were, brainwashed with the US and NATO and the Germans are gonna attack us, right? The bad guys, that's you, bad capitalists, green color. The good guys are pink.
So you were supposed to be grateful for this.
Look what we do for you, little kids. We build nuclear bunkers for you so you can survive, their nuclear attack. Who is the better society? Do they have their bunkers? No, they don't.
Almost 45 years after Eastern Europe was locked behind the Iron Curtain, a political earthquake shook the world. The Berlin Wall fell.
The fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union set off the fourth great wave of independence. The scene is Wenceslas Square. Now the time is 1989. You were here then?
Oh yes, every day. And it was packed with people. On the 17th of November, there was a demonstration at a different place of the city. Students were brutally beaten by the police.
The special police forces start beating these people up. A lot of people ended up in hospitals, police stations. They were loaded up into these police vans driven outside of the city, and these people would come back for more.
My high school was just off that street on the left, and every day after typing and copying leaflets, we would come here for a demonstration.
How many people were killed?
Nobody died. And that's why we called this the Velvet Revolution, because nobody died.
On November 20, 500,000 protesters thronged into this square. 11 days later, the communist government resigned.
We were so excited. We are free, we can travel and we can do all what we want.
I was afraid of United States, and then the regime changed. And now I'm afraid of Russia.
We don't know what will happen in the future, but I hope it will be fine.
With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, 14 countries, 15 if you count Russia, gained independence, including the 3 Baltic states and 11 others in Eastern Europe and Central Asia.
Now most of the peoples of the world are independent. Once U.S. independence was secured, the significance for us of the Declaration shifted to liberty and the pursuit of happiness. What too many people lack today is liberty and a government by the consent of the governed. The quest for liberty and equality and the pursuit of happiness never end. The words of our Declaration can light the way as we go forward.